So, moms and dads, who here has been told over and over again that dairy is a great source of calcium? Who's been told that milk does a body good? Who's been told that it helps grow strong bones for your little ones? That it's really the best source of vitamin D and calcium, and that dairy provides great nutrition for a growing child? Should dairy even be consumed daily? Is this really true? Well, partially. And the issue is that knowing only half of the story can actually be detrimental to your child's health. Cow's milk, which is from conventional and industrially raised cattle, contains dozens of reproductive hormones, allergenic proteins, antibiotics, chemicals, inflammatory compounds, and growth factors, some of which are even known to promote cancer. And while humans are the only species to drink milk after weaning, we actually have no biological requirement for this food. Moreover, the milk we drink today is not what our ancestors drank. And even more importantly, there is a very, very big difference between conventionally produced dairy and grass-fed organically produced dairy. So I want you to keep in mind that when I speak about all the potential harms that dairy can cause, most of the time I'm speaking about conventionally produced dairy. And of course, I'll explain what exactly that is. But first, let's go back to the beginning. What exactly is dairy? So dairy is actually the milk of mammals, and it doesn't just include cow's milk, but also cattle and goats, sheep, and even camel. Not so popular in the US and pretty popular and pretty healthy in other countries. It contains things like natural fats in the form of glycerides, things like proteins, sugars, vitamins, and minerals. So the big question is, why is dairy the first thing to be removed from most healing protocols? Because it is actually very inflammatory. Most protocols aimed at reversing chronic illness, like eczema, or things like autoimmune issues, really start with removing dairy for at least some time. I was trained in the realm of functional medicine, and I have to say that most protocols do an elimination of dairy with quite surprising and beneficial results. In the Eczema Rescue Protocol and in the Eczema Rescue Program, it is also one of the first foundational steps to take in calming your child's itchy skin and calming the inflammation from the inside out. But don't worry, moms and dads, eliminating dairy is not supposed to be forever. The goal for this and for all of the healing that we do for our kids is to be able to enjoy all the different things, including dairy, in moderation. And we'll be bringing it back as eczema fades. As a holistic pediatrician who focuses on eczema transformation, and in my personal clinical practice, Boston Pediatrics, and in teaching medical students and residents and working in a hospital setting, and of course, having the Eczema Rescue Program be more available. In fact, thousands of people have went through parts of it already. I can say that about 60% of kids see improvement in eczema just from eliminating dairy for 4 weeks. Now, eliminating something is not the end all be all. This is just the first step, and that's why I include it in the Eczema Rescue Protocol as one of the first things that can be done if you choose to do that. Let's go back to why it's so inflammatory. Eczema, otherwise known as atopic dermatitis. So if your child was, if you'll hear these words used interchangeably. Atopic dermatitis is generally eczema. It's something called a T-cell mediated autoimmune condition, and it results in very high levels of different chemicals in the body that are inflammatory. I won't go into the nitty-gritty of it, but it's a bunch of cytokines and interleukins. And this cascade is mediated by different types of antibodies in every child's or an adult's body. So some of that inflammation is IgE mediated, some of it is IgG mediated. And if you want to stop inflammation in any person, you want to address both. There is plenty of literature that identifies potential correlation between the intake of cow's milk to elevations of IgG levels, and therefore aggravation of eczema in kids, which means that eliminating cow's milk and milk products often results in reduction of inflammatory cytokines, and that's what's causing so much inflammation in your child's body, and that's what can cause your child to improve quite significantly if you remove it for some time. Now, you won't see improvement overnight. It really does sometimes take a complete elimination of about 3 to 4 weeks to see pretty good results. So again, because eczema or atopic dermatitis is IgG mediated, it's reasonable to assume that a child's immune system, as a child's immune system matures, they will actually experience less reactivity to these eliminated food groups. So the good news is that you might have a child who is super sensitive to dairy now. You might see a significant improvement in your child's eczema by removing it for a couple of weeks now, but that doesn't mean that it's their lifelong fate. As the immune system matures, they experience less and less reactivity to things like dairy. There's another connection to dairy and eczema. About 30% of kids with eczema also have food allergies, and dairy being #1 most prevalent of the food allergies. Many of us parents already know that when your child with eczema consumes something that they're allergic to, it can trigger or worsen an eczema flare. So that is why we focus so much on calming the inflammation in your child's body so that they can start to heal and so they can start to transform their eczema from the inside out. Let's talk a little bit about the truth of conventional dairy. And as I did this research, I was just, you could really do a deep dive into it, and debunking some of the myths is what I love most. There is just plenty of evidence and information out there about what's really in front of us that can so much empower your choices as a parent moving forward. So I'm going to present this information to you with one caveat. You may not go back to yourself later on tonight after listening, or in the morning and listening to what I'm telling you, and feel bad about the choices you made. You have to promise yourself and me that the only way to become an empowered parent, to become an educated consumer, to become knowledgeable in what's around us so we can make good choices, looking backwards and feeling bad about the choices we made is an absolute no-no, and it serves no good. So please make a promise to yourself and to me that you're not going to feel bad about some of the choices you made when I start to debunk some of these myths. So did you know that dairy was actually not consumed worldwide until the advent of modern agriculture? And in fact, most cultures around the globe don't consume dairy as much as we do in the US, both for kids and adults. We're actually the only mammals to drink dairy after weaning. So here's some of what the Dairy Council and the lobbyists and the dairy industry and even our own government forgot to mention when advertising dairy doing a body good. Conventional dairy versus real milk. Cows from conventionally raised cattle contain dozens of reproductive hormones, allergenic proteins, antibiotics, chemicals, inflammatory compounds, growth factors, etc., some of which are known to promote cancer even. This is evidence-based research, and this is a fact. So what exactly is conventional dairy? That is dairy, let's say we're talking about dairy from cows. Dairy cows that are grown conventionally live in cramped, sunless, indoor, grassless stalls, and then they can become sick when they live this way. And to prevent them from being sick and to prevent them from dying, they're fed with antibiotics. Their food is glyphosate ridden, and we'll talk about that in detail in just a few moments. The dairy that is produced has to be ultra pasteurized, which kills all the bacteria, but also denatures proteins and enzymes. And the cows, well, they're Frankenstein cows. They're genetically modified cows to produce a massive amount of milk. Also, the growth hormones are very frequently added to the cows so that they could produce even more milk. And then everything has to be ultra pasteurized and thinned out. And that's why very often you'll see guar gums, carinogens, polysorbate 80, mono and diglycerides added to it to make it thicker and taste better. And very frequently, conventionally raised cow milk is laden with nanotitanium dioxide to actually whiten it, meaning it's very often bleached to make it more pleasantly appearing for the consumer. Let's talk about growth hormones in cow's milk that is conventionally raised. Growth hormones, for example, DES, which has actually been banned in over 50 countries. It used to be a medication that was given to pregnant women, and it was banned in the 1970s, I believe, for its severe endocrine disruption. It was linked to breast cancer, and it's not fit for human consumption. It cannot be used as a medication for humans anymore. It is still given to dairy cows. Because of the natural function of milk is to nourish and promote the growth of young mammals, it contains all the essential nutrients and some anabolic hormones. And so to increase milk productions, cows have been bred to produce higher levels of things like insulin-like growth factors so they can get bigger. They end up pregnant for most of the time that they are milked, which also greatly increases levels of things like prostaglandins and estrogens and other hormones in milk. And what is the implication to our kids? It's not just eczema for our kids, it's chronic illness. And this is kind of scary. The age of puberty, especially female puberty, has been actually decreasing in Western cultures for decades now. For example, at the turn of the 20th century, the average age of an American girl to get her period was about 16 or 17 years old. Today, that number has decreased to 12 or 13 years old. So the difference is significant. It's years. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually mentioned that the average age of menarche for a female, a girl in the US is 12 to 13 years old. That is the average age, but they forgot to mention, and this is the American Academy of Pediatrics, that just because this is the new normal, just because this is the new average age, doesn't make it a healthy age, a normal age, and that it has been significantly decreased over the past few decades. So that is a problem. And not just for our girls, but also boys are now beginning their puberty around about age 10, and previously it was about 11 years old when boys began to have puberty. So there is really a crisis of premature development of our kids, and that is linked to a whole lot of chronic illness. I can't say it's exactly linked to eczema, but I did want to mention it because I am a pediatrician and I'm quite alarmed. So this is something that's important to consider when you're talking about adding hormones to dairy. The next reason to avoid conventional dairy, not all dairy, but conventionally raised dairy, is its antibiotic use. Can you believe, moms and dads, that almost all antibiotics in the US, I would say about 80%, are fed to farm animals? The World Health Organization warns that overuse and misuse of antibiotics in food animals is actually a major source of antibiotic-resistant bacteria that is already affecting humans, leading to infections that are difficult to treat and sometimes impossible to cure. But I'd like to go even further and say that drinking a massive amount of antibiotics on a daily basis because you're trying to do a body good, you're creating a problem with the microbiome. And as you might have listened to me go on and on about the importance of gut health when you're trying to heal a chronic illness like eczema, you need to heal the gut first. The last thing you want to be doing is overusing antibiotics when it's not necessary. Now, of course, antibiotics are life-saving treatments, but very often conventionally raised dairy is just given antibiotics prophylactically, or basically to prevent illness. And if our children are drinking this daily, that's leading to really disturbed microbiome in your child's body. What about the implication to our environment? Did you know that about 90% of all genetically modified soybeans are fed to farm animals? Also, grassy pastures are better for the topsoil than GMO crops like soy and corn. These GMO crops also have shallow roots, and they're depleting topsoil faster than the earth can replenish it. So if we're trying to think about making sure that the future generations have enough high quality topsoil to grow nutritious food in the future, we need to think about what we are doing to the topsoil now and how to make sure that we're replenishing it before we're depleting it. So we know about avoiding herbicides, and we've heard about avoiding pesticides in our produce, But what about pesticides and herbicides in conventional dairy? Conventional dairy is often fed crops that have been genetically engineered to resist spraying of herbicides and the use of these chemicals. These chemical uses have gone up, way up in the past recent years. Looking at reports from the Food and Water Watch, which is something to consider, the total amount of Roundup applied to GMO crops increased 10 times in the past few years, and residues from these herbicides are ending up in our food and in the food for our dairy cows and in all of groundwater. And I'm not going to go too much into how glyphosates and things like Roundup and herbicides and pesticides directly affect and implicate our kids and push them over the edge for having chronic eczema flares and chronic eczema. I'll do a deep dive on that next session. So make sure to tune in because there is a whole lot to discuss there. So is conventional dairy really so nutritious? And this was my favorite part to research because there's so much incredible, amazing, high quality evidence-based medicine, really great studies with lots and lots and lots of people that debunk a lot of really important myths. Most conventional cows aren't fed diets that produce the healthiest milk. So a diet of like excessive amounts of corn leads to an unhealthy amount of omega-6 fatty acids, which carries over to cow's milk. And having an improper balance of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids and that ratio being thrown off is directly linked to autoimmune disease and inflammation. And that is a big factor to consider when we're thinking about our kids who are so inflamed with chronic eczema. And I would say that chronic eczema is really partially an autoimmune condition. So it's not just a disorder of the skin barrier, it's not just genetic, but there is a significant immune reaction or overreaction. So many of our kids also have food allergies. That is also considered an autoimmune reaction by the body. Like, why is our kid's body reacting to seemingly normal foods all of a sudden? And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but if you want to consider how to eliminate some of these autoimmune and inflammatory factors, you want to make sure that the food that your child is eating is actually helpful, not harmful. So what about calcium and vitamin D? What about bone health? Because the main rationale for high lifelong milk consumption in the US has been because of calcium for bone health. There's so much good evidence that show that countries with the highest intake of milk and calcium tend to also have highest rates of hip fractures. How much calcium does your child really need? In the US, the recommended daily allowance, how much your child needs of calcium, the recommended amount is 1,000 milligrams a day for kids 4 to 8 years old. It changes depending on age. If you want more information on what's recommended, you could actually go online and take a look at the data from like the American Academy of Pediatrics to see how much is recommended for kids in the US. But in the United Kingdom, it's half that. It's 450 to 550 milligrams per day, which is considered adequate. So why such a large discrepancy? Why in other countries, healthy countries, is the amount of calcium recommended for kids not as high? Maybe it's because evidence-based studies point to the fact that kids don't need as much calcium as once believed. Among girls in early stages of puberty, calcium balance, meaning the amount of calcium that a child takes in, was, let's say, I have like a whole bunch of numbers here. Let's say in this one study, it shows that about 400 milligrams a day for girls 4 to 8 years old was actually not correlated with bone mineral density, meaning that the main reason such a massive amount of calcium was recommended to kids and adults for years and years and decades was to prevent osteoporosis. But these studies have been disproven and they're not evidence-based. The recommendations have not yet adjusted to what we now know is true. I wonder why. There's no evidence that high calcium intake is needed during childhood to serve as a bank for calcium throughout life and for the future. In a really excellent randomized trial, consumption of 3 additional servings of milk, or the equivalent of 3 servings of milk for 18-month-old girls and boys, and in early stages of puberty, they had no effect on bone mineralization. These findings suggest that a very low threshold of calcium intake is actually needed. We don't need as much as recommended very often based on these studies. Now, I am a pediatrician in the US. I do need to follow the protocols and guidelines, but I want you all to become empowered with the fact that guidelines change all the time. And thank goodness we have an opportunity to do a great amount of evidence-based studies, and just ignoring everything that we now know as evidence and saying, you know what, we've always done it this way, and we have to have all this calcium for our kids so that they don't develop osteoporosis in the future, even though we have all this new data that shows that we don't need as much as necessary, that it doesn't actually help. It doesn't mean that we don't change our recommendations. So it's a pet peeve of mine. I do practice evidence-based medicine with my patients when I recommend anything to you. So I'm just presenting the data that is found in journals and studies that is of significant value to everybody listening. So it's not just vitamin D, and it's not just calcium, but question is, by the way, if you ever bought conventionally raised, like milk, regular milk, conventionally raised dairy, cow's milk dairies, regular old milk, it's not grass-fed, it's not organic, it's just a regular carton of milk that you find in any store. You will almost always see something pretty surprising inside the ingredients. And that surprise is that the synthetic versions of calcium and vitamin D have to be added to dairy. Why? Because conventionally raised cows are not able to produce their own calcium and vitamin D. They don't see sunshine, and their food is not grass-fed. So for calcium, what do? What if you want to make sure that your child is getting plenty of calcium? Well, first of all, stay away from foods that are fortified with calcium. You might as well just take a supplement. Fortification just means that they take a synthetic supplement, calcium, vitamin D, whatever it is, and they stick it into the food product. And you see that often with fortified dairy, fortified bread, fortified cereal. You might as well just take a supplement. We can't try to give our kids dairy saying that it's full of calcium when calcium has to be artificially added to it. That's really surprising, isn't it? So instead of dairy, what you can do to maximize calcium in your child's diet is from other food sources like chia seeds, sesame seeds, or tahini, which is ground up sesame, sardines, especially the ones with the bones. You could eat the bones, they're edible, they're not the ones that are going to hurt you if you eat them, it's safe for kids. Things like bone broths, greens like mustard greens, spinach, collard greens, and kale, and turnips all have significant amounts of calcium. By the way, chia seeds actually has more calcium that is naturally there. It's not fortified, it's not synthetic, than cow's milk when we're looking at it gram by gram. What about vitamin D? Well, very often commercial or conventional milk is fortified with vitamin D. Again, this is a synthetic vitamin, and it's added to this empty product because only cows who live outside in the sunshine, who are pasture raised on grass, they're the only ones that are going to make any natural vitamin D for their milk. And you know, if you're really, yes, vitamin D is important. There are plenty of studies that also show the direct correlation between low vitamin D levels and the severity and the incidence and the prevalence of eczema in kids. Vitamin D is so important, not just for eczema, but for maintaining almost all immune function. It's a master hormone. It's really, really important for a lot of different processes in the body. And it has been linked, bringing the level up to a good amount has been linked to improvement in eczema. And this is why most of the time, and I'm not big on supplements when I teach families on how to transform their child's eczema from the inside out, I'm not too big on supplements. They're not necessary. They take away it's just, they don't replace nutrition ever. They might be a nice bridge, but not all kids can actually get vitamin D naturally. And if you're in the US, and if you're basically above the Atlanta area, you might, Georgia, you might not actually be getting enough vitamin D, and this is why vitamin D supplements with K2 are one of the only things very frequently, like one of the few things that I recommend as a supplement when trying to reverse eczema in kids from the inside out. So lots and lots of dangers when you're looking at dairy, but what about, is there healthy dairy? What about raw milk? What about real milk? So let's go into what real milk is. Real milk is pasture raised, it's full fat, it's really unprocessed. It's inherently a safe food. Raw milk, I'm not recommending that you actually drink. So there's a lot of evidence that shows that there is numerous bioactive components that actually kill the bad bacteria that can cause illness. But the truth is that every farmer has different cattle, and you have to be a really, really smart consumer when it comes to buying direct from farms. In most places in the US, raw milk is banned. Okay, and I'm not saying that this is the solution, but what I am saying is you want to try to get very high quality dairy, and that is not ultra pasteurized, perhaps. Maybe it's non-homogenized. Let's talk a little about what homogenization is. It's all over, like every carton of milk that you could find. It always says pasteurized and homogenized. Homogenization is the process of separating the fat by blasting the living daylights out of it, and with high pressure and high temperatures, and they blast all that fat into tiny, tiny, tiny imperceptible particles, which, by the way, pass right through your taste buds without even being noticed. And these fat particles, they can also attach to nutrients. They arrive in the digestive tract, and when the body absorbs it, homogenized milk particles are so small that they can easily pass through without actually being digested properly and into the bloodstream, which can cause a whole slew of inflammation that is absolutely not necessary in our kids' diet. What about the kind of, let's talk a little bit about what kind of dairy cow should we be looking at. So most conventionally raised dairy is A1 casein, which is one of the components of dairy. That's not what you want to be getting. If you're looking to make sure that the best quality dairy is arriving in your child's life, you want to drink A2 casein, or even consider using sheep or goat milk, because there's a larger component of A2 casein. Jersey cows often are A2 casein cows. These are better, they're easier to tolerate, they're easier to digest, they're a lot less inflammatory. We also talk a little bit about, the question is, like, should we remove dairy from our child's diet completely when we try to reverse eczema? So if you choose to remove dairy for some time, of course, I'm not your doctor, I'm not your child's pediatrician. I would always recommend you speak to your child's pediatrician. This is just general information about how to consider implementing these steps, but make sure that you speak to your child's pediatrician before making any large decisions, especially for younger kids who are growing rapidly, especially for kids who are under 1. You want to make sure that the decisions that you're making are still going to provide adequate calories, fat, nutrients in your child's life. So again, disclaimer, I'm not your child's pediatrician. This is not medical advice specifically for your child. This is just general recommendations of, if you choose to remove dairy for your child's diet for some time to calm some of the inflammation, and then how to bring it back in a very methodological and clear way where you're not causing more inflammation. So there are 2 different ways to remove dairy from your child's life. It could be slowly, it could be cold turkey. One of the biggest questions that I get is, well, my child who is over 1 and they love their bottle of milk before they go to bed. They're toddlers, maybe they're just used to it. They don't really need it for calories, but it brings them comfort. So my answer to you is you could actually, without traumatizing them and taking away their favorite bottle that puts them to sleep, one solution that has worked wonderfully for almost everyone we tried it with is giving them their bottle, but every time you give it to them, you dilute it. And what that means is if you have a child who's having, let's say, an 8-ounce bottle of milk before bed for their comfort, soothing, it feels good. Instead of giving them those 8 ounces of milk, give them 1 ounce of water and 7 ounces of milk. And it becomes a little bit more dilute, and continue to dilute it slowly, 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 slowly. So that's a very soft, easy way to do it, because by the end of the week or so, they're having basically water, and they're not going to be as interested in that anymore. You know your child best, moms and dads, so consider that as one option. The other option is cold turkey. I think cold turkey has been working really well for older kids, especially kids who really want to feel better. And for those of you moms and dads who are listening, who have older kids who are sick and tired of the eczema flares and don't want to itch anymore and are just willing really to make the choices themselves to feel better, having a conversation about eliminating dairy for some time is probably going to be just fine. They're going to be okay with it. So again, you have a choice: cut it out slowly or cut it out completely cold turkey. Just remember, you need to avoid dairy in lots of places. So there's a lot of dairy hidden in a lot of places. We know that milk and yogurt, if it's dairy based, of course it will have dairy. It's also butter, okay, or butter blends. By the way, it is not ghee. So if you're taking out dairy, you're allowed to have ghee. In fact, it is one of the most important nutritious forms of fat that heal and seal the gut lining. It's GHEE, which is clarified butter. And so that is actually not considered to be dairy, and I recommend it. Of course, remove all the cheese that's made with dairy, all those ice creams and sorbets that are dairy based, and gelatos that are dairy based. The whey protein powders, I don't think that kids need to be having protein powders anyway. All of those cheesy snacks, corn chips. Remember that dairy milk chocolate is also dairy. All those cakes and biscuits and muffins that are cheese flavored. A lot of crackers have milk powder or butter flavor. Lots of deli meats even use milk proteins as binders. I don't recommend deli meats actually to be eaten, but just be aware, read the ingredients of what you're buying. Salad dressings that contain butter or milk or those creamy versions also needs to be eliminated. How long do you eliminate it? About 3 to 4 weeks. What about dairy alternatives, right? Do you use plant milk? Do you use milks, malks, MYLKs, all of those? You can. The question I have for you is, why are you using it? Are you using it to, give your child comfort? Or are you using it because you think that it's going to be a nutritious alternative? Because I have some big news for you, moms and dads. Those nut milks or milk alternatives or vegan milks, they're usually not so healthy. If you're using them now, I want you to pause this recording. I want you to go to the fridge, or maybe later when you get home, and I want you to take a look at the ingredients on the bottle of what you're getting, because quite frequently, and almost always, you will see added sugars, thickeners like gums, carcinogens. You're going to see a whole bunch of chemicals and preservatives. So if you're trying to eliminate dairy and you're trying to make good choices for your kids, and you want to add something healthy, it's very often not a regular old nut milk. Be very careful, read your labels. Next time you go to the store, read the labels. The same thing goes for yogurt. You also want to consider, like, maybe it's a very clean almond milk, which is having a moment, but that also is very, very difficult in the environment because it just takes so much water to grow, mostly in California, and it's actually very detrimental to the water supply in California. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I have good news for you. One of the best, easiest way to replace a milk in cooking or for comfort or just for drinking or whatever it is to use things like coconut milk is great, but also making your own hemp milk, which is really just 2 ingredients. It's hemp seeds and water in a blender. So no straining, no soaking, no nothing. And it's extremely healthy. A lot of kids don't love the flavor of homemade blended hemp milk, just with hemp seeds and water straight up. So you could also add a dried date for sweetness. You could add a little bit of honey to it for sweetness, and it goes down beautifully. What about weaning from a bottle over age 1? Like, does a child really need milk over age 1? Again, talk to your pediatrician. Make sure that your child is getting all the calories, the fats, the nutrients, the calcium, and vitamin D from other sources before you eliminate that. So it's not really about, does a child over 1 need the calcium? Yes, but can you get it from sources that are just as nutritious and easy to absorb and healthy for you without all the dangers? Yes, you can. So let's say you've eliminated dairy from your child's life for a couple of weeks. Let's say it was 4 weeks. That's great. And your child is better, and there's no actual allergy, no pediatrician or allergist or dermatologist said to you that you must avoid that. Of course, always follow the instructions of your child's own doctors. But let's say there is no allergy and you were never really told that your child is allergic to it, they can have it. How do you reintroduce it? There's a very specific step-by-step approach to reintroducing dairy. Make sure that it's a very clean source, full fat, non-homogenized dairy, grass-fed Jersey cows or A2 cows, pasture-raised. These cows have been fed non-GMO feed. So that's what we call organically fed organic cows. So if your child is better, you kind of have a choice to make at this point. You can continue on the same path. You can do it for a few more months, as long as your child is getting all the other sources of calcium and vitamins and minerals from food. You don't necessarily need to introduce dairy again. You can reintroduce it if you want to. So how to do this is, now for those of you who are inside of the Eczema Rescue program, there's a step-by-step guide to do this. I'm just going to run through it in a kind of fast way. You want to introduce it in this order: goat milk products, sheep milk products, and then cow's milk products. So you'll do it this way. Let's say on day 1, you eat or drink goat milk products. It could be milk, it could be yogurt, it could be kefir, it doesn't matter. On days 2, days 3, observe. It's actually very helpful to have a little diary so you can keep track of the dates. Now, what are you observing for? Eczema returning, diarrhea, rashes, not feeling good, bloating, upset stomach, runny nose, itchy eyes, allergy symptoms, rashes, itching anywhere in the body, just being more sleepy than usual, not being able to fall asleep. All of those are symptoms of inflammation in the body. It doesn't necessarily need to be eczema to be a symptom. Then you go to day 4 and you have, again, goat milk products, milk, kefir, yogurt. Days 5 and 6, observe. Now on day 7, you do this again, and you have goat milk products. Days 8 and 9, observe. Then you go to day 10, and you start with sheep milk products. Then you repeat the cycle. Days 10, you have sheep milk yogurt or sheep milk kefir or straight up milk. Day 11 and 12, you observe. Day 13, again, sheep milk. 14 and 15, observe. Day 16, sheep milk. 17, 18, observe. And then by day 19, you do the same thing for cow milk. It could be milk, yogurt, or kefir. And then you observe. Why sheep milk and goat milk? Because it has a much less inflammatory casein profile. Usually it's more A2 casein, less inflammatory. It is so much easier to digest as well. It's closer to human milk than cow milk. It's actually quite easy to find a high quality product as well. It's basically not farmed out as much as cow's milk. So let's just get to the conclusion. Now that you are a more empowered consumer, you may choose to get high quality dairy and continue to use it in your child's life. But make sure that it's not the kind of dairy that's causing illness from antibiotics, illness from growth hormones, from the synthetic vitamins added to it. You're going to get the best kind of dairy. And if you choose to try to do an elimination type diet, make sure that your child is getting plenty of calcium from other sources. Once you remove that dairy completely for 3 to 4 weeks, then you can choose to bring it back. But if you're really happy with the results and your child is so much better, you don't necessarily need to do that. Just make sure they're getting vitamin D and calcium from other sources. So that's my talk about dairy, and I hope it was helpful to you.
Not understanding whether so
Sorry.
I'm not understanding whether it's because of dairy or the anything, because I'm just giving very simple things like vegetables, lentils, only one or two kind of lentils, and rice. So I know he keeps asking when can I drink milk because he cannot eat any sweet. So once in a while, like I'm giving him just local honey. I'm trying to implement all what you have said, but I did not see major change. And yesterday, what happened was I tried to give him celery juice, but I mixed it with beetroot, and suddenly it happened. So I do not know it's because of that,
Mhm,
but still I do not see a major change in the
mhm.
first week.
Okay.
So yeah.
So it's 2 weeks that you
Yes.
started. Okay,
Yes.
so it's been 2 weeks since you removed dairy.
Yes.
It's just not enough time, to be honest. So
Okay.
to be honest, it's like, so it might not be the dairy, first of all. We don't know. We don't know. Some kids have a lot of inflammation from it, and some kids don't have a lot of inflammation because of it. There is just a substantial amount of kids that see significant improvement when you remove dairy, and that's why we try. It's not help, it's also just very inflammatory for anybody to have a lot of dairy. So it's 2 weeks, but usually it takes, for like complete elimination with dairy, about 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. But it's not about removing, it sounds like it's going to be a lot about adding. Okay, like
So
stocks and broths and ferments.
like one thing I felt like I should have not done. It changes like now because of the heat. The kids keep playing in the summer, so they usually don't go to swimming. But I way back enrolled in them for just like 2 weeks for swimming.
Okay.
So is it because of the chlorinated water and so much in the sun that is aggravating? I do not know, because definitely I see a little change, but not major change. As you said, it takes time because he's having eczema since like 8 years. So obviously going away also will take time. So in the meanwhile, should we use the steroid like when it's I mean, still it is very severe. So, like when we are removing all the dairy, are we supposed to use the steroid, which the doctor gave in a diluted form, still just to make sure he's soothed and
So so all the recommendations that I give, they're not supposed to clash with what your doctors are saying. So your doctors are never going to say remove dairy, do detox baths. They're never going to say that. It's different information. So I still recommend following whatever your doctor said, because it's impossible for me to say there's a lot of to consider on a
yes.
personal approach. So besides what your doctor said, like there's nothing wrong with steroids to be used when you need to use it. I'm not against them. The goal is to not need to use them forever, right? So that's why we're making these steps. Kids who are older, like over, probably, I don't know, it's not a exact number, but in my practice, I would say kids who are over like 5, they have a long healing journey. Okay, like I really rarely see results in a couple of weeks, no matter what you do. So that's, please consider that. It doesn't mean that that's their fate, but it's only been 2 weeks, and I'm just not surprised that like you're not seeing significant improvement. It's a
But
little,
I really give kudos to the like detailed work you have done. I mean, I'm like, you're such a magic, like the way I was seeing for how to identify from the local markets to the milk you find to the sunscreen. You have even given the products where we can find. I mean, I really see the effort you have made, and I'm just hoping it will work for my kid. But I really want to say from bottom of my heart, the work you have done is really, really appreciated. I mean, no one does this intricate level for helping someone, so it's really nice.
thank you. A little tear in my eye. I really appreciate
No,
it.
no.
It helps as well. Um, it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating for you because you're mom and you want to see
Yes.
your kids better. It's frustrating for me because there's not one. Wish there was a single one protocol. It
Yes.
really isn't, because every child is different. Their genetic makeup is different. Weather changes, things happen. Like all the reasons behind it, they're a little different. It's a combination of immune response. It's a combination of genetics, location, and all sorts of things, food allergies. So please keep at it. Don't get discouraged. You're doing great. If the eczema doesn't, also, did you take there's an assessment that I urge you to take, all of you to take in the beginning of the program. It's a self-signed questionnaire. It also looks at the different components of health, not just eczema. So it's called the self-signed questionnaire. It's in the first section of the digital program. And it might be helpful to look at now and then a couple of weeks from now, because when we're looking at reversing eczema, we're not just reversing eczema at all. Eczema is a symptom of a bigger problem. So you might see improvement in other parts of your child's life. Are they sleeping better? Are they, I don't know, more vibrant? Are they happy? Are they less bloated? Are they pooping better? All of those things are really important to consider. Summer does mess with things because just everything just goes to wild, right? It's like bananas. and so a lot of the strictness goes away. So it's a little bit more challenging, I think, during summer months and holidays. Regarding chlorine, swimming, actually, chlorine baths are one of the things that are, and I don't recommend doing this personally, but chlorine baths are one of the conventional methods that are used for kids who have eczema because it kills off the bacteria in the skin. But many kids who have eczema have a very, what's the word? The skin barrier doesn't have great integrity, and so they're very sensitive to chemicals. And if there's nothing wrong with swimming, it's great. But if you want to neutralize that chlorine, the best thing you can do is detox baths using baking soda in the bath at night, because it'll neutralize it. So for those of you parents who have kids who are swimming in chlorine pools, try putting baking soda in their bath. It's actually under the protocol, under the detox, the remove chapter for detox baths. So that's something to consider. You are not alone when it comes to summer. It's hot. The sun is not going to make it worse most of the time, but the heat might. And so I'm actually doing a whole live event it's a free one that's inside the Eczema Rescue Club on July 11th, next week, all about summer skin. So tune in or rewatch it. It'll be available for everyone, because you're not alone in this. It's quite common. I love summer because more vitamin D levels naturally, and kids are happier, I think. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. I like talks also. So now my kids are like having baking soda bath and then having an orange to get the vitamin C. I mean, you wrote everything so nicely. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Hey, Kimberly. Hi.
Hello. I have a question for you. My daughter is just a little over 5 months old, and I'm at the point of needing to do food introductions.
Mhm.
So my pediatrician has said she's more than ready. She has recommended, she's cited the study that talks about giving her all the major allergens early.
Yeah.
I'm like scared to do that, because if the problem is the microbiome and it's that gut isn't sealed, then isn't that going to create an allergy? Should I wait to heal the eczema, to heal her gut before I introduce those things? How do I process that?
Great question. Okay, so when a pediatrician or when a physician makes a specific recommendation to introduce certain high allergy things to your child, they're doing that on a very risk specific recommendation for your child. So then I'm just going to kind of like give you a synopsis. For a while, there was for like a decade more, it was, don't give kids high allergy eggs, dairy, peanut. Don't give those high allergy foods to kids because it can cause allergies. This is how we functioned for like a decade. And then evidence-based medicine, right? And by the way, like in the US, we have the most amount of allergies. So the world of conventional medicine caught up, changed everything, flipped everything upside down recently. And they said, if your child is prone to eczema, severe eczema or severe allergies based on different risk assessments that are done for your child specifically, they need to be introduced these things early for their body to adapt. So it is quite possible that the benefit of introducing these things early outweighs the risk.
So if I'm trying to then follow like what you're saying of giving her egg yolks, I think the other thing was banana in that 4 to 6 months. When do I insert these high allergens? Do I just jump into it? Because if I'm not giving her the cereals and things, like is
Well,
one of the first foods she gets peanuts? I'm not sure how to navigate that.
what did your pediatrician say to start with? Cereal?
Cereal,
Okay, so that's not a high, yeah.
the usual oats and things
Okay.
like that.
So it's, you can, so that's because it's not, but that's not a high allergy food. So start there. And then I would say like start simple and then do like a high allergy, whatever your pediatrician recommended as a high allergy introduction, right?
Okay.
Eggs
So
are,
she said,
by the way, the things that are high allergy, they're also very healing very often. Now,
okay,
now the dairy, I'm gonna leave it up to your pediatrician to decide on that. It's again, the point of this whole thing was it's not necessarily unhealthy.
mhm,
It's just you want to be very mindful of quality. When you're picking oats, don't go get the oat powder that has a ton of preservatives.
mhm,
Like the on a shelf in a can, jar, box, whatever. It's garbage. If you
mhm.
read the ingredients, you don't want that garbage. You want real food, right? So just high quality oats, and then you introduce, she'll probably say like eggs is one of the newer, that's actually going to help heal her gut. So you're doing two things at the same time.
Even with the whites, even the egg whites is okay. So like I could then, because I've tried to give her some of the egg yolk, which she doesn't like actually, but if I did so if I could give her some of the oats, do I need to like sprout anything? And then I give her like what scrambled eggs, like with the whites combined in there, and that's okay. Cause then it would be, she said eggs first, then peanuts, and then gluten. She wanted wheat.
So I agree. So there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure it's high quality. Wheat.
Okay.
So sourdough is a good option.
Okay.
That the program is a little different for kids who are under 1 because it's not like we're trying to eliminate things, we're trying to add things, right?
Right. Right.
All of those things, they sound great, they're fine. Eggs are very healing, and then you want to maybe put some bone broths in there also to continue the
Okay.
healing process.
Now I gave her like probably a tablespoon of my lamb broth yesterday. She
Okay.
really threw up. She loved it going down, but she got real sick last night. So
Was there salt in there or seasoning or anything?
there was
A lot of flavor. Bone broth is it's very different flavor. Like it's not.
She loved it. She
Sure.
took it down, but she just about a couple hours later,
Yeah.
everything came up, and she was, yeah. So then I thought, well, maybe I should have started with chicken, or should I have started with a stock instead of starting with the bone broth?
Yeah.
Like,
So stocks are easier to digest.
okay,
Chicken is pretty easy to digest.
okay,
Yeah. So don't say like all bone broths are out. I would say
right.
stocks are a lot easier to digest.
Okay. So if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's okay for me to start to give her some cereals so that she has some low allergen foods as I'm giving her some higher allergen foods.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's okay for me to start mixing those things in order to get those allergens. And it's okay for me to do some chicken stock to get some of those stocks and broths into her.
Yes. Just
Okay.
remember that when it's okay to mix, but with all new additions for an infant, you want to wait a few days before you start something new.
So is it okay then, do I give it to her for 4 days in a row, or do I give it to her and then go away from it for a couple days?
So there's not one right answer. That's why you're probably confused.
I'm so
I know.
I'm like terrified I'm gonna mess it up.
So the bad news is there is not one right answer. The good news is is not one right answer, meaning you can't really mess it up.
Okay.
And if you I just love looking at what other cultures and countries do, and it's so different. It's just, and everyone lives, and everyone's good, and everyone grows. That's what is like so exciting. That you can't really. There's not one answer. I guess you can. I would say, okay, if you want hardcore, like this is what you should do. Consider giving it 1 day, actually, if you want to really be extra, you could take a little bit of the food, the new food, put it on in a wrist before bed, like rub it on. And in the morning, make sure there's no rash. This is not
Okay.
a scientific study,
Mhm.
okay?
Yep.
If there's a rash, maybe pick something else that week. The
Okay.
allergies, the reactions, they change every day. So it doesn't mean that there's an allergy forever. It doesn't. It's
Okay.
something to consider when you're making. So you could try that. Then
Okay.
give the food small amounts, wait 36 to 48 hours, and then give it another 3 days in a row.
Okay.
It's a nice hybrid. Now, if you ask every pediatrician, they're going to give you different answers. If you ask different moms that did this, they're going to give you different answers. And what
Okay.
that means is there's no specifically wrong way to do it.
Okay. That is, you've made me feel a lot calmer, and you've made me feel like I can give her some of these cereals and it'll be okay. And at least I have a plan, and that's very beneficial. So
Yeah.
thank you very, very much. And I'm really enjoying your program. So just letting you know that it's very much appreciated for my own healing as well. I've been on a long journey myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so nice to connect.
Thank you.
Who else has questions, ideas, comments? Anyone else? We have time. Or just
I have a question.
Yes. Who is this? I just want to.
Hi, this is Shirley.
Hi, Shirley. Oh, hi.
Hi. So Sarah has been doing good, but I still haven't introduced her to like gluten again or dairy per se. Like she had some yogurt and she did not have a reaction to it, which was great because before she was having reactions even when she was eating like cheese or milk or yogurt.
Wait, how
so
long? Let's just go back. How old is your child?
she's 4.
Okay, great. How long
Yes.
was she on the program? Like a couple of months?
We have been in for 3 months.
Okay, well, time flies. Okay, yes. So
Yes, it's
so
already been 3 months.
you removed dairy and gluten 3 months ago?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And before she used to react to dairy, now she doesn't?
yes. Well, we didn't know it was dairy, like,
Yeah.
but we found out like she had some reactions because of the histamine.
Okay.
She had histamine issues, so I removed that. But we went on a trip last week, and my brother-in-law gave her some yogurt, and she was fine.
Okay. Fair. Okay. Good.
But I didn't know if there was a right order. Like
Yeah.
I know you said like give like any of the things like cheese or
Yeah.
kefir or yogurt. Like is there some order? Like is it better to give like cheese first or yogurt first, something like that?
I like the ferments more than because they're healthier because they have probiotics and they're easier to digest. You know what? I would probably go with kefir first because it doesn't have lactose, and some kids are lactose intolerant, and you don't really know like if it was the lactose intolerance that caused usually it's not a skin reaction, but probably kefir, like plain, and then you can mix it with something like you could put in a smoothie, you know.
Okay.
Kefir, yeah. So if you're gonna pick one, cheese is not it. It would be like a kefir or yogurt, yeah. And then the order, you could actually look inside there's like a section inside the digital program that's called My Child is Better Now What? Just exactly for you, Shirley. So My Child is Better Now What? So you could actually do like a very specific protocol to bring it back dairy, and then you could try with gluten.
Okay.
But she's like, her skin is better, eczema is better, right?
Yes, she does not have any like skin rashes anymore, like at all. Like a few days back, she was tested for allergies, and she was allergic to cobalt. So like chocolate has a lot of cobalt, and my sister gave her some chocolate during the travel, and it was a lot. Like she had like 3 different kinds, and she was itchy in the night. But I mean, like if I compare how she was, I mean, she was fine. She didn't have any rash at all. She was just like itchy, and then like I put some neem oil and massage her, and she was fine. So I'm like, oh, so to the other mom that was speaking first, I think,
Yeah.
Bamshi, I think I wanted to tell her, like, it takes some time of
she's right
like
there.
being consistent, but and then also like the results are not like overnight. So as I was telling some of my experience with my daughter, it's like maybe she still had some reaction, but it was like a lesser reaction. Or maybe she's like less itchy, or she's able to sleep better. Like all there is like many different signs, and you will notice like with time things get better, with time of being consistent and and doing the things. And also, as you were saying, like little by little, like adding one thing at a time or removing one thing at a time. Any small step is good.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy to hear that. Also, it's not common to have cobalt tested, which is whoever did such a comprehensive study. That's great. It's usually not tested, these micro allergies. Who else would like to say anything or have questions, comments? Anyone else? Anyone else wants to say hi? Last call. Hey, Courtney.
Hey, first of
Hi.
all, I appreciate this program. I've been diving into, I've dealt with allergies with 2 different kids now, my oldest 20. So back then it was me navigating through this on my own, trying different things. So to have it all condensed now for child number 2 going through this, but everything, like I can so relate even back to, I'm a pediatric nurse, and 2 was like putting Band-Aids, and then it was my kid, had the issue. So I appreciate all the work you've put into this and just testing all the creams and all of that. The broths we've been doing, do you prefer, I know, making your own, but was there a frozen
Yeah.
version too that you recommend to grab?
Yeah. There's really only one brand that I love that I can recommend. There might be more, but I can't find them. And the reason why I like this brand the most is because they don't, so there's a few brands that use high quality ingredients, organic ingredients, great. There are a few brands that, don't put anything extra that's not necessarily great. That's Mean Mindfully great. But the only one that I found that doesn't use pressure cookers is Brodo, Brodo. Their like home base is in New York City, but they ship frozen. Really great brand. So I'm in New York, so I have like full access, and I check them out in person, and they do it, their products, like I would like my parents do. I personally not great in the kitchen. Like if you give me something to simmer for a day, it's just not gonna happen. And they're right. Fire. So I would say that they would do it the way that if I was gonna do it, they would be like that, like they do it. Pressure cookers. So most people hate me when I say pressure cookers are not the most optimal way to cook something. The pressure, of course, it's convenient, that's great. And if it's a matter of like using of having homemade meals versus takeout or something that's not as healthy, of course do what needs to be done. But when you're buying all the most amazing ingredients to make a very specifically healing food, a bone broth, and you're using a pressure cooker, you're going to denature proteins. For many kids who have severe allergies, pressure cookers are used to denature the proteins, so the body doesn't recognize them anymore as the same proteins, as a way for them to be able to eat. This is fact, right? So did you say you're a pediatric nurse?
Yes.
Okay. So you probably know, like when you're looking at kids who have milk protein allergy and you need to I'm going to go a little bit scientific, and you need to use special kinds of formulas that are hydrolyzed, meaning they're broken down to such an extent that the body doesn't recognize it as a milk protein anymore, or a particle of, because they can't eat anything, they're reacting to everything. Pressure cooked meals are used to denature proteins to such an extent. But if you're trying to give a child food so that they can heal, we need those proteins to be pretty intact. Not so that the body can recognize it and use it properly. makes a healing food. So I don't recommend, that's why I don't recommend pressure cookers. And that's why I like brodo, and it tastes good. Oh, by the way, also like it's the best tasting one,
Okay.
in my opinion. Maybe not the spicy one for little kids, but it's really, really yummy.
Okay. And the ghee, is there a certain one or just checking that there's no additives?
So the ghee that I personally get is from Clearview Valley Farm. I order it online. It's from a farm that has Jersey A2 cows. They do sell raw milk. I don't personally use raw milk. I mean, I'll boil personally. I will boil it a little bit, like I'll lightly pasteurize it. There is a big difference between lightly pasteurized and ultra pasteurized when it comes to keeping it real. So the products, their cows are amazing. They're in Pennsylvania, small
Okay.
company. Their ghee is phenomenal. It's worth the shipping, in my opinion. I just really like their farm, and they make really good stuff. So it's Clearview Valley Farm is where I get like a large container. It lasts forever. It doesn't go bad.
Okay.
So it's super high quality. I know there's other brands, but that's the one I like the most.
And the proteins are taken out of the ghee. That's why it doesn't cause
Yeah.
the reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, you could even make it
Okay.
yourself at home. If you get really high quality butter and you boil it out and it separates, that's clarified butter. That's ghee.
Okay.
It does not taste like butter.
Okay.
Don't expect it
I've always never grabbed it just because we have like the slew of the food allergies, all your like main,
yeah.
components. So, but this is, see, I'm learning more. Okay. And I think that was it. And allergy testing, is there like, I know there's all different types and that's like something they want us to go do more of. Is there one that you feel is more accurate?
So no, so it really depends on what's needed for your child.
Mhm.
And that requires like a very individualized approach.
Okay.
There's two different ways to approach it. One is like a conventional allergist, dermatologist, pediatrician way, which is blood test or skin prick testing. It looks at some types of antibodies and reactions. It does not look at sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
That's the world of functional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are a lot of like direct to consumer tests available now. Like you could go buy a kit online and do it at home yourself and then get the results yourself. I actually don't love those for many reasons. So if you're looking to look at sensitivities and not overt allergies, then maybe find like a naturopath or holistic pediatrician.
Okay.
Because they'll be able to the quality of the tests
Right.
much better. And
Right.
sometimes you get information that's not necessarily helpful when you're working one-on-one. Like you can't just say like, this is not good for my kid and that's it. So I recommend actually going through like a well-trained practitioner.
Okay. Thank you. I know it's so hard because I use functional medicine here. I'm in Florida and there are no functional medicine pediatricians that look at kind of both sides of the fence. So they look at me like I have like two heads when I'm like, this is a gut issue. This isn't this, type of issue. And they don't believe me. So it's okay. I'm going through this program to navigate. So we'll work on it from that aspect.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Thanks, Courtney. Anyone else wants to say hi? Anyone? We have some time. I'll answer any and all questions.
I can ask a question. One of the other things I got a little bit stuck on because my daughter has allegedly, I guess, all of these food allergies, and when I look at the meal plans, like, a lot of them have like eggs and a lot of seeds, and I'm very concerned because she has peanut allergies, but also like she can't even have like split peas or any kind of peas. So when I see things like quinoa and flax and all these things, I'm just like really worried, because I've seen her have reactions before and it's terrifying to even like try her with those things. And so I just then freeze up and I'm like, well, what do I give her? outside of what she is already eating.
Okay.
And so I don't know if there are, I guess like, I don't know. I don't know what my question is, but
Mhm. Okay.
it's like alternatives to
yeah.
some of like the stuff.
Yeah. So good question. Good point. I hear you. Is she allergic to meat?
No, she can
Okay.
have meat. She can't have fish.
Okay. So my background is being trained in gut and psychology syndrome protocol. It's a very intensive protocol for really sick kids. And it works really well, but it's very restrictive. It's very restrictive. And I don't necessarily think it's a very good idea for eczema and for kids who are not severely ill. The point of this is that it's mostly a meat-based healing program. Okay. Meaning like you can get a lot done without those extra things, without the grains. A lot of autoimmune programs are grainless, without the beans, without the seeds. It's not necessarily needed for healing. I think what is very helpful for healing, if you ask me, like, if I could just pick like 2 things to do, if I could only pick 2 things to heal my gut or my child's gut, it would be stocks and broths and ferments. So you're not at a loss because she has sensitivities to certain things or a lot of things. The fact that she can have stocks and broths and meat is a big deal. That's really the cornerstone of the program. Everything else is like extra, really. I mean, juicing is really nice too, to be honest. That would be like my third. Okay, the 3 things to focus on. And you know what? Also, you mentioned before, like, it's so hard to cut stuff out, right? Just forget about it.
But she already has the dairy allergy, so that was never even in the
So
picture.
forget it. Just add stuff in, and it doesn't have to be every day, but instead add stuff in. Maybe it's 1 meal a day that's different. That'll make a big difference.
Okay, I'll do that. That's good to hear.
The hardest part is removing, I think, than adding, like when kids are used to something and she's already not having dairy. So
yeah, and she's good with any fruits, so the juice can work.
Okay,
perfect. Thank you.
Juicing even a couple of times a week is really helpful. It's not an all, I'm gonna just repeat it. It's not an all or nothing situation ever.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Good luck. I hope let us know how it goes. Let me know.
Yeah, I'll come back with the report.
Okay. And if you ever want to connect, just send a message on the board, like looking to get some inspiration, and we're there for each other. So
yeah.
Anyone else want to say anything? Anybody else? Okay. Well, I really encourage, thank you for staying on so long. I know we're all very busy parents. If you have any suggestions of how to make it better next time, let me know. We're gonna be live again in 2 weeks. It's a different time. It's always a little bit of a different time to make sure like everyone has access. We're in different time zones and have different work situations. If you miss a live, they're always going to be posted inside of the digital program and inside of the group. So take a look. You could always rewatch it, ask questions in between sessions. Next week, I will be going deeply into glyphosates and gluten. Also a very exciting topic. Lots of really fun facts there. And hope everyone has a really, really, really beautiful week. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.